Introduction. Hello, today I will explain the Potsdam Declaration, which Japan accepted under unconditional surrender, incorporating the situation in Japan at that time. The Potsdam Declaration was issued to Japan on July 26, 1945, by the heads of government of the United Kingdom, the United States of America, and the Republic of China. It consists of 13 articles and is officially called the Final Declaration of the Demand for Japan's Surrender. It is also referred to as the Declaration of the United States, Britain, and China by the countries that issued it. The Soviet Union joined this declaration later and ratified it. The Japanese government accepted this declaration on August 14, 1945, and on September 2, 1945, the surrender document to the Allied powers was signed and took immediate effect, thus ending World War II and the Pacific War. To summarize, after the surrender of Nazi Germany, from July 17 to August 2, 1945, the leaders of the three major Allied powers, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Soviet Union, met in Potsdam, just outside Berlin, to discuss the post-war handling of World War II. This meeting is referred to as the Potsdam Conference. The Potsdam Declaration was a surrender recommendation issued to Japan during these talks, under the joint names of British Prime Minister Churchill, ROC President Chiang Kai-shek, and US President Truman. Stalin, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, did not sign it, having only received a report afterward. On August 14, 1945, the Japanese government notified the Allies of its acceptance of this declaration via the Japanese legations in Switzerland and Sweden. This fact was announced to the public via radio broadcast the following day, August 15. Based on Japanese records, I will explain the situation at that time. The Japanese Prime Minister who accepted the Potsdam Declaration was Suzuki Kantara. At the time, the Japanese administration supported the outline of war guidance, which emphasized preserving the imperial soil and protecting the national polity, and was prepared for either a thorough resistance or total annihilation. It is also believed that the United States, seeing the resolute attitude of the Imperial Japanese government toward the Potsdam Declaration, ultimately decided to drop atomic bombs on Japan. Suzuki himself, in his autobiography, expressed regret for having ignored the implications of this situation. Amid these circumstances, Hirohito secretly conveyed to Suzuki his intention to seek peace, and Suzuki, pushing his 77-year-old body, tirelessly worked nearly without sleep on efforts to end the war. Nevertheless, the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, and on Nagasaki on August 9 after the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. In the Supreme War Guidance Council meeting, which began just before dawn on August 10 and was attended by the Emperor, a heated debate took place. The debate was between the proposal for conditional acceptance, advocated by Togo Shigenori and agreed upon by Yonai Mitsumasa and Hitanuma Chichiro, and the acceptance with 4 conditions, advocated by Anami Koteyuchi, who favored a decisive battle on the mainland, supported by Chief of General Staff Umezumi Jito and Commander-in-Chief Toyoda Soemu. No conclusion was reached. Around 2 a.m., Prime Minister Suzuki stood up and stated, with the utmost trepidation, "I now come before you to inquire your thoughts and, with your divine consideration, let this conference's decision be finalized." Hirohito, with tears in his eyes, expressed his approval for the immediate acceptance proposal, stating, "My opinion concurs with what the Minister of Foreign Affairs has been stating." The Emperor's sacred decision was made, but the interpretation of the article on the national polity in the Potsdam Declaration caused a division between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the military. An imperial conference was convened again on August 14 to seek the Emperor's decision once more. The conference concluded at noon on August 14, and Japan's surrender was decided. Early in the morning of August 15, nationalists led by Army Captain Sasachi Takeo attacked the Prime Minister's official residence and his private residence in Koishikawa, but Suzuki was rescued by his security guards just in time. At noon, the Emperor's Gyokuon broadcast was aired over the radio. Earlier that day, Anami Kote Chiyo committed suicide. On the same day, Suzuki submitted his resignation to Hirohito, and the Suzuki cabinet resigned, although Suzuki continued to perform his duties until August 17, when the cabinet of Prince Higashi Kunyi Hiko was established. On September 2, aboard the battleship Missouri anchored in Tokyo Bay, Shigemitsu Momoto, the plenipotentiary of the Japanese government, and Umezumi Jito, the plenipotentiary of the imperial headquarters, along with representatives of the Allied nations, signed the Instrument of Surrender, which stipulated the faithful implementation of the provisions of the Declaration. Thus, the Declaration was formalized as a diplomatic document for the first time. The following is the content of the Potsdam Declaration, updated to modern, easy-to-understand language. 1. We, the President of the United States, the President of the Republic of China, and the Prime Minister of Great Britain, representing hundreds of millions of our people, have discussed and agreed to give you the opportunity to end the war with Japan. 2. The large American, British, and Chinese Army, Navy, and Air Force, augmented by several times their own forces from the West, are ready to deliver the final blow to Japan. This military force is supported and emboldened by the determination of the Allies to continue the war until Japan ceases to resist. 3. The consequences of Germany's senseless resistance to the power of free peoples throughout the world serve as a clear precedent for the Japanese people. The military forces now assembled in Japan are incomparably more powerful than those which, when applied to Nazi Germany, inevitably devastated the land, industry, and livelihood of the German people. The use of our maximum military force, backed by our determination, would mean the inevitable and complete collapse of the Japanese military and likewise the complete destruction of Japanese territory. 4. The time has come to decide whether Japan should continue to be ruled by the selfish militaristic advisors who have brought the Japanese empire to the brink of destruction by their senseless aggression, or whether Japan should follow the path of reason. 5. Our conditions are as follows. We will not deviate from these conditions. There are no other conditions, and no delays will be tolerated. 6. We insist that a new order of peace, security, and justice cannot be created until irresponsible militarism is wiped out from the world. The power and influence of those who deceived the Japanese people into making the mistake of world conquest must be permanently removed. 7. Until such a new order is established, and Japan's war-making capabilities are confirmed as destroyed, the various strategic points within Japan designated by the Allies will be occupied to ensure the accomplishment of the basic objectives we set forth herein. 8. The provisions of the Cairo Declaration shall be carried out, and Japanese sovereignty shall be limited to Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, Shikoku, and a few smaller islands, as we shall determine. 9. The Japanese military shall be completely disarmed, and soldiers shall be given the opportunity to return to their respective homes to lead peaceful and productive lives. 10. We have no intention of enslaving the Japanese people as a nation or annihilating them as a people, but all war criminals, including those who mistreated our prisoners of war, shall be severely punished. The Japanese government should remove all obstacles to the revival and strengthening of democratic tendencies among the Japanese people. Freedom of speech, religion, and thought, as well as respect for fundamental human rights, shall be established. 11. Japan will be allowed to maintain industries that support its economy and enable the collection of fair and equitable reparations. However, industries that could enable Japan to rearm for war shall be excluded. For this purpose, access to raw materials, distinguished from control over them, shall be permitted. Japan shall be allowed to participate in world trade relations in the future. 12. Once the above objectives have been achieved, and a peaceful and responsible government has been established in Japan in accordance with the freely expressed will of the Japanese people, Allied occupation forces shall immediately withdraw from Japan. 13. We demand that the Japanese government immediately declare the unconditional surrender of all Japanese forces and provide appropriate and adequate assurances of the government's sincerity in its actions. Otherwise, Japan's only option is swift and complete destruction. Briefly, here is a summary of the key provisions. Paragraph 6 clearly states that Japan's militarism must be eradicated. It declares that the power and influence of those who deceived the Japanese people and dragged them into war should be permanently removed. This clause was the first step toward the demilitarization of Japan. Paragraph 7 provides for the occupation of Japan by the Allied powers. It states that Allied forces shall occupy designated areas of Japan until they are satisfied that Japan's ability to prosecute the war has been destroyed. This placed Japan under Allied control. Paragraph 9 provides for the disarmament and dismantling of the Japanese armed forces. It states that Japanese military personnel will be disarmed and allowed to lead a peaceful life. This was a clause aimed at the complete demilitarization of Japan. Paragraph 10 mentions the punishment of war criminals. It declares that all war criminals, including those who mistreated Allied prisoners of war, should be punished severely. Based on this clause, the Tokyo trials and other trials were to be held. Paragraph 10 also calls for the promotion of democracy within Japan. It clearly states that freedom of speech, religion, and thought and respect for fundamental human rights should be established. This is a clause that has had a significant impact on the post-war Japanese constitution. Paragraph 11 concerns the issue of rebuilding the Japanese economy and compensation. It stipulates that while industry for the purpose of war is prohibited, peaceful economic activities are permitted. It also mentions reparations to the Allies, while also taking into account Japan's economic recovery. Finally, paragraphs 12 and 13 set forth the conditions for the end of the occupation and the procedure for surrender. It clearly states that once the objectives of the Potsdam Declaration have been achieved and a peaceful and responsible government has been established, the occupying forces will withdraw from Japan. It also calls for the Japanese government to immediately surrender and express its willingness to surrender. This is a summary of the major provisions of the Potsdam Declaration. These provisions determine the direction of post-war Japan. While promoting demilitarization and democratization and holding Japan accountable for the war, the Potsdam Declaration also laid out a path for peace and economic recovery. The Potsdam Declaration was humiliating for Japan, but it was also the first step toward a new Japan. It is important for us to understand the significance of the declaration and to remain determined not to repeat the horrors of war. Concluding. In this issue, we have looked at the Potsdam Declaration in detail. The Potsdam Declaration was an important step toward ending World War II. With this declaration, Japan accepted unconditional surrender and the war came to an end. However, one of the main reasons the Japanese government hesitated to accept the Potsdam Declaration was concern over the continuation of the emperor system. For Japan at the time, the emperor was the symbol of the nation and the center of its ideology. The loss of the emperor was thought to lead to the annihilation of the state. This perception may be difficult for people outside of Japan to understand, but there are many examples in history of countries that have been disrupted by the loss of emperors and kings. In recent years, France, Russia, and Kuwait are examples. For a country like Japan, which has been united by the ideology of the emperor for more than 2,000 years, the loss of the emperor would be a major event. Moreover, the elimination of the emperor by a foreign power would cause great shock and anxiety in terms of public sentiment. As a result, the Potsdam Declaration did not include a clause explicitly abolishing the emperor, and Hirohito was not executed. This allowed Japan to maintain the emperor and its national identity after the war. However, during the Allied occupation, Japan's political, economic, and social systems were largely restructured. Under the Constitution of Japan, The political power of the emperor became symbolic, but his very existence contributed to the stability of post-war Japan. The Potsdam Declaration, while humiliating for Japan in some respects, was at the same time the first step toward peace and a break from war. Through this declaration, Japan turned from militarism to democracy and began its path back to the international community. Japan's current peace and prosperity are built on the lessons learned from the Potsdam Declaration. We need to understand this history correctly and renew our resolve never to repeat the horrors of war. Finally, I would like to conclude this video by sharing my personal thoughts. These are only my personal opinions, and I would like everyone to have their own ideas. The Potsdam Declaration played an important role in establishing the post-war world order. The ideals set forth in the declaration, such as the preciousness of peace, international cooperation, and respect for democracy and human rights, are still the goals we should strive for today. At the same time, however, we need to look at the dangers of the Potsdam Declaration. This declaration was imposed on Japan as a result of the Good War by the Allied powers. Japan was forced to surrender unconditionally after suffering the devastating effects of the atomic bombings. Some of the reforms implemented during the occupation ignored Japanese traditions and values. The Potsdam Declaration was implemented in a way that deprived Japan of its independence. When studying history, it is important to take the viewpoints of both winners and losers. Today, we need to have a multifaceted understanding of the world, rather than one-sided assertions of justice. The international community today faces similar challenges. The danger of powerful nations imposing their own values on other nations. This is one of the problems suggested by the way the Potsdam Declaration was implemented. True peace and stability come from respecting the independence of each country and engaging in dialogue on an equal footing. An attitude of understanding and cooperation, rather than imposition, is essential to spreading the values of democracy and human rights. The Potsdam Declaration teaches us the tragedy of war, the preciousness of peace, and the importance of international cooperation. At the same time, the Declaration also teaches us the danger of imposing universal values and the importance of looking at history from multiple perspectives. I believe it is important to keep in mind the light and shadow of the Potsdam Declaration as we move forward toward the realization of a peaceful and just world. While aiming for the ideals set forth in this declaration, we must also deepen our understanding of limitations and problems. I believe this is what we need to do in order to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past and build a better future. This is my thought as an individual who has studied the history of the Potsdam Declaration 78 years after it was issued. I hope that all of you will look at history for yourselves and deepen your own thoughts, rather than simply accepting my opinions. By looking at it from various standpoints and perspectives, the lessons of history will become richer. Learn from the past and look to the future. With this in mind, I believe it is important for each of us to maintain our commitment to peace. How did you all feel? Thank you for watching. I am sure you have various opinions about the content of this issue. Whether you agree, disagree, or otherwise, we welcome your comments. I hope that through constructive discussion, we can deepen our understanding of history. See you in the next video.